Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. Gonna try to be keeping up with videos. They'll probably mostly be made on the weekend because I really don't got much to do on the weekend. But today we'll be reading the story called The Tragic Child. It's a story about Mary Bell, a 10-year-old, when she committed her first murder. The story is written by Jonathan Wright. Before we get started, disclaimer. This video may include graphic content that might trigger some people. So if you have any problems with like gruesome stuff, I would recommend watching with caution or just clicking off this video. And let's just jump on into it. Uh, it was the summer of 1968, Scotwood, England. The dead body of a 4-year-old boy named Martin Brown was found on the floor of a house. Blood and saliva were dripping from his cheeks. There were no obvious signs of a violent attack at first. The officers believed that it was an accident. That all changed when a few weeks later they found the dead body of another kid. 3-year-old Brian Howe's body was found in an industrial area. The area was well known to be a children's playground. The police found some strange wounds on Howe. I'm assuming that's how you pronounce it. There were puncture marks on his thighs. His genitals were mutilated. The officers also surmised that his hair was abrupt, uh, uh, abruptly cut. But most importantly, there was a peculiar laceration on his belly. It was as if someone tried to write the letter M with a razor. A pair of broken scissors were found at the crime scene. The community began to panic. The details of the crime scene were utterly unsettling. Sorry, I lost my place. Oh, unsettling for the population. The investigation officially began. The police questioned all of the children in the area. Their first priority was to make sure that the other children weren't in danger. Among all the children interviewed, two had acted very strange. The first one was Norma Bell. She was 13 years old and seemed very excited about the murder. She answered all of the questions with a smile. The whole incident was like a joke to her. There's 11-year-old Mary Bell. The second kid was 11 years old, Mary Bell. She, too, remembered off-putting during the entire process. These two were not related in any way, despite their matching last name. During the investigation, Mary claimed that she saw an 8-year-old boy with Brian the day he was murdered. Mary had apparently seen him playing with a pair of scissors earlier. She described the boy, but there was a major problem with her story. The boy she pointed out had an alibi and was at the airport when Brian was murdered. But as you are already guessing, that wasn't the strangest part of Mary's account of the story. When she mentioned the scissors, the detectives eyed her suspiciously and gave each other long, knowing looks. The scissors weren't confidential evidence, and the public didn't know about them. Though not incriminating enough, the police had a new lead. If Mary knew about the scissors, she probably knew more about the murder than she let on. It was clear for the detectives that at least one of these two girls, to some degree, was involved with the murder. The day of Brian Howe's death, the day of Brian's Howe's funeral, sorry, not death, one of the detectives saw something horrifying. He saw Mary standing outside of uh, house as the coffin came out. She was laughing hysterically and rubbing her hands together. The detectives decided to do something immediately before another child fell victim to this vicious cycle. He questioned Norma Bell, Mary's friend, and this time she absolutely baffled the detectives with her honesty. Now the solid proof was there. They had a first-hand witness. Norma's answer was enough for the police to bring in Mary Bell again. According to Norma, Mary told her that she killed Brian and brought her to the body to show it to her. Mary had then proceeded to describe how she squeezed his neck and killed him. The police questioned Mary again. She didn't admit to anything and claimed that Norma was lying to get her in trouble. They let her go at first, but with some additional information from Norma, they questioned Mary again. Mary finally admitted that she was there when Brian got murdered. "It was Norma," she said. "Norma is the one who killed Brian." Both girls were arrested and charged with murder. During the trial, police found out clues that led them to more tangible evidence. 2 days after the death of Martin Brown, a nursery school in the nearby area was broken into and vandalized. There were four disturbing notes left behind. The notes were scribbled in a way that resembled a child's work. Two of them were strange and unsettling. One of them said, "We did murder Martin Brown." The other one said, "I murdered so that I may come back." The police still thought that the death of Martin Brown was an accident, and the notes were just a sick joke. But was also something else. Some kids had overheard Mary screaming, "I am a murderer!" She would point at the house where Brian's body was found and say, "That's where I killed him." Mary was famous among other kids for telling stories, so many of her claims weren't taken as seriously as they should have been. "I like hurting little things so I can fight back," one of the guards heard her saying during the trial. Mary's lack of emotions and sadistic behavior led psychiatrists to label her as as psychopathic. But here's the real question. How did an innocent little girl become a psychopath? Mary Bell was described as an intelligent but violent girl. Once she wrapped her hands around her classmates' necks and squeezed it. She was in kindergarten at the time. Martin Brown and Brian Howe, the two victims of Mary Bell. There's pictures of them. Perhaps the only consultant a community can seek in time like is in an idea. The idea that we can be better human beings to prevent such catastrophic repercussions. You see, Mary Bell didn't have an ideal childhood, nor an ordinary one. When Mary was born, her mother Betty didn't want her. "Get that thing away from me," she always said when Mary was an infant. Betty always dropped Mary off with her relatives. When Mary was 2 years old, she became cold and detached. She thought that no one loved her. When she was a little girl, she watched her 5-year-old friend get hit and killed by a bus. Betty was a prostitute, and Mary was frequently and intentionally overdosed with drugs by her mother. Most tragic of all, Mary claimed that her mother allowed her to be sexually abused by the clients. For Mary, existence was not merely burdensome, but brutally inhuman and harrowing. These scattered pieces of information from an appalling, childhood explain many things about Mary's attitude. During the trial, Mary and Norma continued to implicate each other in the committed. Psychologists testify that Mary Bell had the classic symptoms of psychopathy, so it would be safe to assume that she was not completely aware of or responsible for her actions. On December 17th, 1968, the verdicts were rendered. Norma Bell was Norma Bell was acquitted of all charges against her. Mary Bell was uh, convicted of manslaughter due to diminished responsibility because of this psychological diagnosis in the trial. She was to be detained at Her Majesty's pleasure, which is an indefinite sentence of imprisonment. 9 years later, in 1977, Mary Bell was transferred into an adult prison. She managed to escape, but was quickly caught afterwards. After 12 years in 1980, she was released from prison. Mary Bell was 23 years old at the time. She started a new life under a new name. In 1984, Mary gave birth to her daughter. There was a great concern in the matter of whether or not Mary should be allowed to keep her child. After all, she murdered 2 children years ago. But in the end, Mary Bell was allowed to keep her daughter and raise her. Mary's daughter was not aware of her mother's past. Mary was granted lifelong anonymity for both her and her daughter. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe and turn on the post notifications so that way you never miss another video. And I will see you in the next one. Peace out.